Hi everyone, it's Gary here, and very warm welcome to the fourth official. Now, joining me on this show to look at the breaking story regarding Rangers' appointment of Kevin Thelwell as their new sporting director this summer. I've got not one but two wonderful guests. First of all, my regular co-host and man that's got an even better facial hair than I've got. It's the wonderful Mitch. Mitch, how the hell are we?
Always a pleasure, never a chore, mate.
And joining us also from the Unholy Trinity Everton Podcast, it is Mike Richards. Mike, big thank you for joining us on here. Looking to get a bit of your insight in terms of Kevin's job that he's done across the last kind of 3 years at Everton. I think certainly from a Rangers perspective, we broke the story last night on our YouTube channel that we're certainly enthused in the fact that Rangers have actually appointed a proper person for this job as opposed to promoting one of the chairman's pals. So the fact that it's someone that's got a bit of a pedigree within that role is certainly encouraging from a Rangers perspective. But from doing a lot of kind of reading and kind of a lot of the stories that have came out over the course of the last 24 hours, it seems to be held in quite a high esteem from let's call sensible Everton fans in terms of the job he's done and what's been quite trying circumstances over the last couple of years that down Goodison Way.
Yeah, of course. Like you say, I think most sensible Evertonians will certainly have an understanding about how difficult the environment has been for him to actually operate in. When his first transfer window in the summer of 2022, we had a little bit of money at that particular point back in Frank Lampard, if I'm not mistaken, after a terrible season and surviving, what the penultimate game with the 3-2 win against Crystal Palace, that famous game. And we went into the summer, I think, with a bit of hope. And I think where the club was then, it was literally probably the beginning of nearly the end. We were hitting a tough spot. Mashiri was looking to probably gamble again. Although we did have to sell key players in Richarlison as well, especially. So Kevin Thelwell came into a club that was going to have to go through a transition. Although we were having a little bit of a try in that final window where we had a little bit of money floating around. He brought in the likes of Onana and Dwight McNeil, obviously a great free transfer with James Tarkowski. So there was a decent-ish window there. But then obviously from then onwards, he's been operating in really difficult circumstances, and that's got to be considered. You can't ignore it. We certainly, as Everton fans, have been unable to ignore it. And let's face it, the club, without trying to be too dramatic, wasn't too far from extinction. If we believe what we're sort of being told and what we know. So to try and be a director of football and try and bring players in those circumstances and trying to get players to come from clubs that are going to accept deals where you've got no down payments, and he said about we'll start to pay you in 12 months, which is what happened with a lot of our signings in recent times. That's difficult, and your aspirations as a football club and as a fan base have to take a massive hit, and that's what he's been working in, and that's why I think most, as you say, sensible Evertonians will understand that. I think he's come out of it with immense credit. I think that there's been a few misses along the way, of course, but generally speaking, if he was operating maybe going forward now under the Freakin group, I think we'd definitely see some more successes along the way. But for me personally, I think he's done a decent job in very, very trying times.
So the obvious question then presents itself in terms of obviously new ownership for Everton this year, new stadium obviously on the horizon for next season, and obviously David Moyes has done an excellent job in terms of kind of steadying the ship and ensuring that Everton haven't been anywhere really near real trouble since he's came in this year. So why are Everton moving away from Kevin Thelwell at the end of his contract this year, given the fact that he seems to have done a decent job under difficult circumstances?
I think for me, when you get new owners, and obviously when we've been through such difficult times under the previous owner in Farhad Moshiri, I think the Freakins have been very keen to come in, assess the whole situation, assess everybody's jobs, and they very much see this summer coming as the start of a new era and a brand new dawn, and that goes with, obviously, David Moyes came in. They were keen to back Sean Dyche in the January transfer window, and he was the one who sort of, threw the towel in, which was probably surprising to some, maybe not to others, because of, he went through those a really hard 18 months. But they saw the summer as the real time to do a reset, because this season was all about making sure we stayed in the Premier League, given the fact we had a really, really poor start. So the manager, I think, was going to change in the summer regardless. That's changed a bit earlier. So David Moyes will certainly be here as we go into the summer transfer window. But I think they always wanted to bring in new people after they'd had time to assess what the situation was at the club. Speaking to people, of course, they had boots on the ground, I think, very, very early in the buying process. So before it was confirmed as being ratified by the Premier League in December, they had people at Finch Farm at our training ground for many, many months. So they were speaking to players, speaking to, obviously, staff, speaking to Kevin Thelwell. And whether it's just the fact that visions didn't align, I doubt it. I just think it was more the fact that they just want to bring in new people, fresh pairs of eyes. We've got Angus Kinnear coming in from Leeds, and a couple of his staff that he's got there. And I think it's very much they want to take the club in a new direction. That direction is up. And I think they feel that they to start that process, it was to bring in new people. And it's no slight on Kevin Thelwell, in my opinion, because I feel that if he was given better circumstances to operate in, he'd do a good job. We've got a decent reputation from Wolves, and he worked, obviously, for the Red Bull group as well. And as I say, I think he's done pretty well for us as well in really, really trying times. But just very much new ownership, new eyes, new ideas. And that big reset button's getting pressed come the end of this season. Obviously, we've got our eyes on our fabulous new stadium on the banks of the Mersey there, and they just want new people in. It's as simple as that, and they seem to be very forward thinking. They've already announced a couple of new backers in the way of the Roundhouse Group, who actually bought the football club. It's a consortium. They've brought in, I think, Jason Kidd, who's the Dallas Mavericks head coach basketball. He's come in today as another backer of that consortium, if you like. And we had another gentleman who's a multi-billionaire, a Texan as well, who's involved with the NFL. He's also came in yesterday as part of the board, as an observer to the board. So they're getting people in quickly. They're trying to change the culture. So it's going to be interesting to see how we go ahead with David Moyes, probably overseeing transfers more than potentially previous managers have done. They've worked with Kevin Thelwell. Prior to him, we had Marcel Brands. So very much a director of football model, whereas we're moving slightly away from that, I would say. Angus Kinnear is going to be CEO, I think. So I think David Moyes will have more of a say on transfers, which potentially may be a reason why Kevin Thelwell has felt himself, well, it's not for me, maybe going forward. So a bit of a change in model as well is probably the reason why.
Do you think there's a wee bit of a sense for Kevin Thelwell that it's very much a job done for him, though, as well? He came in under the remit of, we are a bit of a bin fire at the moment. That's the best way to put it. I think, at the time, there was firefighting going on left, right and centre under the Mojny era. And he was brought in with the, of, can you turn this around? And obviously you guys went from having horrendous overspending in transfers and everything else that was going on behind the scenes to now probably being the beacon of the standard bearer of how transfers are supposed to be in terms of buying in relatively low, and even the additions to the squad that have been made, likes of Ashley Young coming in on a free transfer. The experience has come in from players without any transfer fees attached to them, and probably on relatively sensible wages by Premier League standards. I think, do you think that kind of almost brings his job kind of full circle in that respect, and it's maybe there is that sense that for all parties under the new ownership and everything else, that Kevin's come in, patting the back for the job that he's done, but the time to move on is probably there, just as you say, new owners having new men in those positions?
Yeah, I think he's probably been worn down, as Sean Dyche was as well. It's not a normal environment for a director of football in the Premier League. Like you say, Everton have become a club in the last couple of years. If we've got a positive net spend, I think we've spent. I think the only side we've spent less than in the current Premier League sides I think, off the top of my head, is Ipswich. Now, other sides have come up and been down and come up again and still spent more than we have. So it shows you exactly where we were. It shows you the mistakes that have been made over many, many years. And they've come back to bite us seriously. We've had 2 points deductions. Now, for me, that's unforgivable in terms of the fact that, we got into that position. We can all argue whether it was right or wrong. And as a fan base, we'll always say we were harshly treated. And it's been proven since, Forest got a much less punishment than we got for a much more larger overspending we had. Made no sense. And they wanted to, don't forget, they wanted to take, 10 points off us initially, which we actually got taken down. So they went for Everton, massively, and used us as part of a political pawn, effectively, in a political game over the whole independent regulator in the Premier League and within football in this country. So, we feel bitter about that. But then you have to look at, well, okay, the club sort of knew what was going on. And, under Farhad Moshiri's leadership, if you like, he's got us into that position. But the club will argue, well, hang on, we did speak to the Premier League on a regular basis. We were in conversation all the time. Everton couldn't buy a packet of toilet rolls without passing it through the Premier League, first of all. That's where we were. We were talking to them. But I think if you're a director of football and you're having to watch literally every single penny, and you're looking to try and, one of his jobs was also to look at the academy side of things, because what saves a football club money is bringing players through as kids. And it can save you 30, 40, 50 million pounds on buying a new player if you bring through a talent that plays regular first team football. So he was trying to do all that side of things as well. I think he's done pretty well with that, to be fair. And, we are starting to see a few more players now, certainly getting better loans. Everton didn't use a loan market well for the younger players. And, we had players there who were 23, 24. Still playing for the under-21s. We're never going to make it as a first-team Everton player, but we ain't getting any kind of loan time at Championship clubs, League One clubs, Scottish clubs, whatever it might be. So
talent holding.
That's it. That's it. And you look at it now. We've got some real quality sort of coming through. Harrison Armstrong's a prime example. Who's gone on loan to Derby, 18 years of age. What a talent he is. And Kevin Thelwell, I think, if you look at the under-21s and under-18s, they're having a bit more consistent success. But those players in those age groups are now getting time at Championship clubs, at League One clubs, and they're going around, different leagues to get experience. And that's what they need to be doing. And that's down to him. But I think, his day-to-day job, which you would argue is about looking at bringing in players in each window, so talent identification, overseeing the scouts and things like that, must have been incredibly difficult to, because you're probably going through to each window, not knowing really what you're going to have to spend. It was sell to buy effectively, but it was sell to buy, but let's not spend what we bring in. We brought in Beto and we brought in Yusuf Chimiti, about 18 months ago, and the two of them were literally, there was no down payment to Udinese or to Sporting Lisbon. And Everton only started paying for the two of them in the summer. So not many clubs will agree to that. And people then say, well, Beto's not of the quality that Everton needs as a Premier League striker. Well, he's not of the quality because nobody will let their good players go for no down payment. It's as simple as that. So Beto's got his attributes, but is he a number 9 for Everton Football Club? No, he's not. And that's not speaking to say, we're a mammoth football club and we should be in the top 4 at this moment in time. But he's not the kind of striker that you want to have going forward to try and make you progress. But that's where we've been. You mentioned Ashley Young coming in. He's now 39 years of age and he's coming on a free transfer. He's now in his second season. You've got him. You've obviously James Tarkowski. He's been a success, you would argue. He's coming now for a few years and done particularly well. But we're looking in the low markets all the time. We're looking in the free markets. And we're now in a position this summer where, because of how tight the purse strings have been, we've got 13 players this summer who are either out of contract or whose loan deals are coming to an end. So you're potentially looking at, you've got to replace 13 players in the summer. Now, okay, the financial position is much, much better. Of course it is. We've got new owners in. They've restructured debts. We're going to the fabulous stadium, which is going to bring in a lot of income, a lot more income than Goodison Park does. But you try and bring in 13 players into a first team squad in one window. It doesn't happen. So we're still going to see free transfers. We're still going to see loans, but the quality, I think, in terms of those paid transfers will be better. But Kevin Thelwell didn't have that luxury, unfortunately, so he couldn't probably come to work and do the job that he wanted to do. Like you say, he was firefighting, like the manager was as well. He was firefighting. They work quite well together. But what I will say for Kevin Thelwell is he came out and he spoke at numerous times over the course of the season, which is what Everton fans craved, because with the situation that we were in, you quite often felt that you were in the dark and you were guessing. But he would come out and he'd say, listen, I'll be honest with you. There literally is no money there. We're going to have to be clever with how we structure deals. We're going to have to use a loan market and the free transfer market. So what you'll probably find with Kevin Thelwell, assuming that Rangers give him that bit of freedom, he'll want to talk to your fans and try and explain, obviously, what's happening as and when he can. And as I say, there was no worse club to do that than Everton, given the off-the-field issues that we were having.
And I think that's certainly a skill set that's made him incredibly attractive to Patrick Stewart and the Rangers hierarchy. We're finding ourselves in quite a similar position, obviously, that Everton have done recently with takeover pending in the summer, and quite a significant period again of financial mismanagement, which means that Mitch will quite happily kind of back me up on this. The cupboard isn't terribly plentiful when it comes to resources in Scottish football anyway, aside from if you're getting that Champions League money coming in every year, and certainly Rangers haven't done that enough over the course of the last kind of 5 to 10 years. So he is going to have to be creative. He is going to have to find some gems in some untapped markets, look at short-term players, whether it is your Ashley Young type profile players that can come in, make an initial impact, but maybe don't necessarily have a sell-on fee, but also look to the future and find players such as Hamzy Gaman, who we brought in this year, who can come in, do a season, and then get flipped for big money and then give you money to play with. So I think that's certainly a skill set that's brought into the dance in terms of from a Rangers perspective, because certainly the finances aren't there that even Everton, a Premier League club, would have available to them. So he is going to have to be creative. He is going to have to be quite clever and be very good at bringing in money in as much as spending money. And I think that's something that we can certainly see from an Everton perspective, has been able to get big fees in for players that have gone out the door as well.
Yeah, he has, and that's one thing obviously that's been important for us in the last few years or so. Obviously, like Onana comes in for say about 30, goes for 50. There's a decent profit within the space of a couple of years there. Alex Iwobi, he got a decent fee for him from Fulham. I think he was in the last year of his contract as well. So he's certainly not averse to getting decent fees for players, and that's what you always need as a football club to be able to function. The transfer market in terms of selling players is important as well, and that's what the likes of, as you say, Brighton do so well. They bring in players for peanuts, relatively speaking, in modern football, and they sell them on for huge amounts of money, and that's how they operate, and it's a brilliant model, and they seem to have it down to a T. But what I'd say is, in the same breath, you also want to be competitive as well. So Brighton that have done well in terms of league position, qualifying for Europe. I think we all as football fans want to win trophies, and that's the next step is having that model, but then also being competitive. And I think at times he's done well with that. I think his talent identification is good. Iliman Ndiaye is a good example where he was identified over 12 months prior, if not even longer. He was on Kevin Thelwell's on his chart to go, right, he's one that I want. Couldn't get a deal done when he was at Sheffield United because he wanted to go to Marseille, which was his boyhood club. And then he didn't do well at Marseille, but we kept watching, and we got him in. And if he didn't get injured in the Merseyside derby, the chances are he would have walked away with our player of the season this season. Mohamed Kudus was seconds away from coming to the football club until Manchester United said they give Ajax £90 million for Anthony, and that was that deal gone then. So we were getting him for absolute peanuts at the time. He's identifying these players. Victor Gyökeres, who's obviously now at Sport Lisbon, they got from Coventry. Everton were in for him, but obviously couldn't structure a deal because we didn't have a great deal of money. So Kevin Thelwell has identified a lot of players, and there's plenty of players I'm missing as well, I'm sure, that have gone on to be really successful in the last sort of 2 or 3 years, but he couldn't get the deals done because of our financial situation. So, if he gets a bit of backing and gets a bit of money and a bit more freedom, then these kind of players, will come through the door. And that's why it's a shame in the sense for us that he wasn't given, looking ahead, he wasn't given maybe 12, 18 months to sort of prove himself when he's got funds. I think that's the real thing. He's shown what he can do without money. And as I say, a few failures in there, the standout ones, Neil Mopey, potentially one of the worst signs in the club's history, just the fact he just didn't fit in. And he's certainly
a strange cat as well, isn't he? Because he speaks about Everton like he didn't even want to be there in the first place.
Yeah, and we don't want him either, to be fair. So there's no love lost. And I think, to be honest with you, I think when he speaks and he says things and he puts things on social media, first of all, it's not even him, because he hired a social media manager to basically make himself appear funny and get more engagement. So half the time, it's not even him. But there's no love lost there. I think when we brought him in, again, another deal where, we'd spent money. I think it was the same summer as we brought in Onana and Dwight McNeil. And we had to bring a striker in. And he was about 6th or 7th on the list. He wasn't even anywhere near what Frank Lampard wanted. But the thought was, in the end, well, maybe he will complement Dominic Calvert-Lewin. Obviously, big man, little man kind of situation. Scored 1 goal this time at Everton, which was a winner against West Ham. And that was literally all that he did. And he had plenty, I go back to the start of last season and he was starting games. And at the first game of the season against Fulham, he had 3 1-on-1s and missed them all. So, he was getting chances, but he just wasn't putting the ball away. So he never worked. The likes of Ruben Vinagre, who was a Portuguese fullback, but I think he played half an hour. I can't remember ever seeing him. Might have been a League Cup game. Never fancied by Lampard. Never fancied by Sean Dyson, and he went. So there's always mistakes, but you have to sort of look at, well, what pond were we fishing in? And at times we were fishing. We were fishing.
Came back out.
We were fishing in a sort of in a lower league pond, so we were sort of fighting maybe with championship clubs and clubs from that weren't saying like the top sort of 4 or 5 leagues in Europe, and that's what we were trying to do. When we have to try and be clever, and we were signing players that other clubs wouldn't look at because they weren't the level, and we were saying, well, that's all that we can do, and that's so you are going to get mistakes along the way as well. And unfortunately, we had a few, but I wouldn't say many, to be fair. I think that even like Ashley Young has come in. And again, I mean, he started this season really, really well. He was a regular under Sean Dyson in a really poor start of the season. We had a 39-year-old fella, similar age to myself, who was a standout. He did okay last season, although he was liable to get booked most games. But that was just his old legs, I think, catching up with him. And, there's been some free transfers there and some transfers that I think have been really, really successful. And as I say, I think he now needs a clean break himself, go somewhere different, a change of environments. I think his reputation has been enhanced at Everton personally. Other Evertonians may disagree, but I don't think that's sensible, to be honest with you. And I don't think some Evertonians even know half the story. And I'm sure when Sean Dyche brings a book out, which he will, that will tell a bit more. Yeah, listen, he'll make some money off that. Believe me, because there's a lot of things that we don't know. And I think when people read those kind of books that will come out and we get those kind of accounts, maybe they'll be a bit more understandable. I think it'd be great for him to just to get that break, and as I say, for yourselves, a fresh pair of eyes. You've got a professional in that particular role now to come in, and that's his job.
No,
yeah, I think we're the same. You look at what we're doing now with the board and the fact that the Freakins are bringing in professionals, basically, whereas we've had for years jobs for the boys and girls. We had Bill Kenwright, who had Denise Baggett-Baxendale. He brought in Graham Sharp, who obviously is a club legend, just to potentially appease the fans. But Grant Ingles, it was all people that basically wouldn't say no to the chairman, effectively. So Bill Kenwright was still sort of running the club under Farhad Moshiri. Whereas now, the club full of sentiment is gone, and the club with ambition is now coming back, and it's time for us to compete. And as I say, I think that's probably part of the reason why it was right to let people leave and move people on. But
yeah, and there's quite a bit of synergy there again with the kind of situation that Rangers find themselves in going into this summer as well, with the 49ers and Andrew Kavanagh coming in to look at it, as opposed to it being fans with deep pockets trying to kind of keep the doors open. Mitch, obviously we broke the story last night with regards to Kevin coming in the summer. I know you've got a bit more detail in terms of what that remit is going to look like for Kevin Thelwell when he finally comes through the doors in the summer.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I actually wanted to pick your brains about, Mike, was down at Everton, do you guys, or have you guys been using one of the player data models down there? You know, kind of identifying your targets based on player data sets that you want for the style of play for the club, or has that been something that's only slowly coming in now under the new ownership?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. You know, most actors of football will use that. That's the modern way, and there was certainly been elements of that. I think what the issue has been with Everton in terms of that probably wasn't the be all and end all, is that there's been such a chain of managers, so many different styles as well. You know, even if you go from Rafael Benitez, you go to Frank Lampard, you go to Sean Dyche, you obviously then go to David Moyes. They all differ in their approach. So players have been signed for particular systems, and it gets to the point where you go, it's like a jigsaw, it just doesn't fit. So it's very much been, I think, because of the financial situation that we've been in, and I think the message that's coming from higher up has been, well, our target is survival. So certainly when Sean Dyche came in, survival. His first full season was survival, and he took that mantra into his second full season, which is this season, which was survival, which was wrong for me because I think the squad was much more balanced. So I feel that
more capable.
Yeah, most definitely. I said it on our podcast going back many months ago, and said the squad's underperforming. The side's underperforming. That's down to tactics, of course. Also, you've got to look at the players as well. But they are playing to instruction. So I think that a lot of those players that were brought in didn't fit the system, and they had to try and mould them. But Thelwell will certainly, I think, you know, Sean Dyche, the Freakins were pretty sure when they first came in that he was going to stay on. So I would assume that they would have been looking at targets that fitted a particular data set, and they want players who can play a particular way in a particular system. How long term the club were looking when Sean Dyche came in, I don't know. I mean, I think he had a 2-year deal or 2.5-year deal. So it's not a huge, not a really long contract. But football, you know, data in football now is the be all and end all, isn't it, when it comes to transfers? So certainly that would have been getting used. But do I think it's probably when I went to the wayside a little bit? Yes, because we couldn't get probably our number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 targets after time. So then it's like, well, who have we got left? Who's left in the pool?
What's left in box B?
Exactly right, and that's the problem. So sometimes those players that you're bringing in don't fit 100% what you're looking for, but it was needs must, and sometimes it was almost bodies over quality. That's how I saw it, just to try and get us through.
See, I think that's actually one of the really good things of the situation that Kevin Thelwell walks in. We've had 2 windows pretty much of gutting out a load of players that really weren't fit for purpose. And for us, what we've really found with that now is he's kind of got the bare bones of a squad to work with now, in terms of we will need some experience in there, we will need some youngsters in there, but we're also going to need to shift a couple of players that are on the books just now for. There's going to be players like Nico Raskin in there, you know, Hamza Gamari in there, players that have got particularly decent transfer values on them just now, that I think it's quite reassuring to hear that Kevin might very well be the guy to say, we're going to need some functional but not sexy signings over here, that's going to be the experienced players that make up the squad. Right now, the player 2 instead of the starting players and then the money that he does have, he can attribute then to the starting 11 and get those functional bodies in for minimal payments.
Yeah, I think, by the sounds of what you're saying, it's going to be a major rebuilding project, and I think like we've had to have, it's patience, and that's the real key. And there's got to be an understanding that this is the position that we're in. This is obviously, Rangers are a massively successful football team, of course. And it must be difficult given what's gone on, obviously, with your neighbours in terms of the success that they've had. And we live with our neighbours. Our neighbours are now on the cusp of winning the Premier League. So we're having to deal with that. And haven't won a trophy. It's nearly the 30th anniversary since our last trophy, which is absolutely embarrassing, really. So I think fans, and it's a really hard thing when you say, "Oh, you got to be patient now," because we've been patient, and I'm sure you've been patient for many, many years, and you've had some really tough times, obviously, with going down and things like that, and all the financial problems you had. Was it Craig White? Was it?
A white knuckle, right?
Yeah, with his name. So I think patience is really the key. Thelwell has proven with us what he can do, obviously in really trying circumstances, and he will bring experience in, of course. He'll look to try and develop that academy and the younger players to try and utilise them as well. But as I say, it's not going to be an overnight sort of remedy or success. It's going to be a project, and I hate that word when you say it's a project, but it very much is. And he's got to try, and he'll come in. He'll obviously, again, fresh pair of eyes, assess everything. I'm sure he's doing that work now. I mean, with the overlap between Everton and Angus Kinnear, and obviously Thelwell and Rangers, there's going to be an overlap, I think, and he'll be doing some
sort of gardening leave type.
Yeah, I mean,
bit of a he's there in body, but not really doing much for next season.
Yeah, I think that's very much the baton's probably being passed, to be honest with you, because we know David Moyes is going to be the manager. He will have, I'm sure, been identifying targets from January onwards. As much as Moyes was saying, well, we can't look into contracts and things like that until we're mathematically safe. We've been safe for ages. When we want to put a few wins together, there was no way that those sides below were going to catch us, because they're absolutely hopeless. So we were going to be okay quite a while ago. So I think a lot of the work for the summer's already been done by David Moyes, by scouts. You would have been speaking to Angus Kinnear, and obviously the board and those in charge of the purse strings. So yeah, I think Thelwell will be doing his work now for Rangers in a way, and he'll have his eyes on the job that's coming in the summer. And who knows, maybe he's looking at the younger players at Everton, potentially, maybe who he could take on loan deals. I'm sure Everton would be quite happy to be speaking.
If you've got them spare.
But,
and I think that there's obviously a bit of a relationship there between the two clubs anyway, when you're talking there about academy players, and obviously relatively recently Everton gave us 16 million quid for our greatest kind of academy prospect in a long time, and Nathan Patterson, and for one reason or another he's not quite kicked on, but he's still a player that's got a great deal of potential, and I think we hope that he will come on. But is he maybe a player that could benefit from maybe a loan deal out to get proper football next season, if he's not necessarily going to be first pick for Everton?
Yeah, funny one with Patterson, because he came in under Benitez. Benitez brought in him and Michalenko, and then got sacked about a week later or a few days later. So it was bizarre. So Lampard came in, and Lampard seemed to like him, to be honest. Very much a sort of an attacking fullback, a modern day fullback. He's been beset with injuries, as you'll know. So he's never been able to cement a place in the first 11. And he's a player that most fans are eager to be seen, to be given time, and to be given a run of games. And when he sort of threatens to get a run of games, he breaks down and gets injured. And that's the problem. I mean, he's been back for quite a while now. He started against Arsenal at left back, believe it or not, because Michalenko was injured. Had a really good game by all accounts, obviously on the wrong side as well. And then since then, he's been put back onto the bench. But I think now what we might see with Patterson, James Tarkowski looks like he tore his hamstring at the weekend against Man City. And I'm sitting in my seat looking across at the bench thinking, well, there's Patterson warming up. There's Ashley Young warming up. I can see Coleman milling around. We had 3 right backs on the bench. And next minute, Michael Keane comes on and goes on at centre half because we're playing Jacob O'Brien as at right back. He's 6'6", he's massive, but he's playing right back and he's been brilliant. David Moyes has put him there. He's been fabulous. But the change was put him in for Tarkowski in the middle of Branthwaite and put Patterson on at right back. That was the change I'm thinking about. You know, he's got that pace. He'll drive you forward as well. But I think now looking ahead for the final 5 games of the season, I think for me, Patterson should get a run now at right back for those 5 games, assuming that he stays fit. So depending on how he does, it's very much an audition, I think, for the manager. He'd be looking at him thinking, well, can he be in and around my squad for next season? You know, Patterson was now 23, 24. He's not a baby. He's not a baby anymore. He's certainly filled out, I think, since he's come. He's got bigger and stronger. And he's going to want to play regular first team football. So if he can impress over the next 4 or 5 games, assuming that he starts, then maybe he can go into next season as a starting right back, because we are looking at both full back positions now in the summer, 100%, to see who we can bring in. Now, if it doesn't work out, maybe you might say to him, well, you do need to go and play some regular football and show that you can keep yourself fit, play week in, week out. So maybe if we keep him at the club and we're not going to be starting him, it could be an option.
Frank, I'll take him in for him.
Yeah, absolutely take him back up the road with a right back. We absolutely need this summer as well, so it could fit a lot of parties. But say fitness is always going to be the kind of the key thing for him. And from a Rangers perspective, we've had enough players on the treatment table for the last 18 months. So we kind of want people coming in this summer that are going to be fit and play more than they don't play. But it might be one to watch this summer. I know there was some rumours about him in the January window, and obviously nothing happened with that. But yeah, maybe one to watch.
Yeah, I think so. And you know, we, as I say, David Moyes is now, he's been at the club for a good few months. He will have assessed all those players, but obviously there's nothing like playing first team football. So I think a lot of players are in a situation, those who are out of contract in the summer, obviously looking to earn new deals, those who are ending the loan deals as well. And some of the players who are on the periphery, it's their chance to impress the manager. But he is one who I think has got potential to either move permanently, or, like you say, maybe it's a loan. I mean, maybe you buy him back. Potentially, maybe that's an option if Everton look to go in a different direction. But he's certainly one that he's not off the table, I don't think, for a loan or a permanent transfer.
Big thank you to Mike for joining us on this one. It's been a brilliant insight into Kevin Thelwell's time down at Everton. If you've enjoyed hearing from him, where can they find more if you're of an Everton persuasion and you want to check out the pod? Where can we find you?
Yeah, across all the usual podcast platforms. Obviously, your Spotify and Apple mainly are the main two, aren't they? Social media, the usual X, Blue Sky, Instagram, Facebook. Just type in the Unholy Trinity Everton Podcast, and there's only one of us, that's for sure. So I'm sure you'll find us, no problem.
Perfect. I appreciate your time for coming on. A big thank you to everyone for listening and joining us on this one. As we all know, it's going to be a big summer with lots to come. But as always, we'll keep you up to date with everything here on the Fourth Official, both here on Patreon and also over on our YouTube channel. You can join us. It is www.patreon.com/the Fourth Official. And we will speak to you next time. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.